So this is a scene of a child getting arrested.
Police! Get down on the floor!
What's going on? I've got children upstairs!
I haven't done anything. Look, you've got the wrong house. I'm telling you, you're making a big mistake. I'm making a mistake.
Oh, police, suspect found! Show me how! Get your hands in there! Get your hands in there so I can see him now!
That's a scene from the Netflix show Adolescence where a 13-year-old gets arrested. So that's really intense, and a lot of parents watch that and say, wait, can that actually happen? I mean, this took place in some other country. What if this happened in the United States? Can they arrest my son or daughter like that? And the answer is yes. But what happens after that? What happens after a juvenile is charged with a crime in the state of New Jersey? The moment a child becomes involved with the police, a lot of parents assume the worst. They're assuming prosecution, criminal court, permanent records. The bottom line is that juveniles are treated much differently than adults when they're accused of a crime. And they're in an entirely different system than adults. So over the next few minutes, I'm going to walk through what actually happens when a juvenile is charged in New Jersey, how the juvenile justice process works, and what families should understand early on, because the juvenile system is designed very differently from the adult criminal court, and understanding that difference matters. Hi, I'm Daniel Rosenberg. I'm a former prosecutor, former juvenile prosecutor, so I am intimately familiar with how the juvenile justice system works and how the state intends on prosecuting juvenile matters. First thing to understand is what a juvenile is in New Jersey. That is anyone that is under the age of 18. The next thing to understand is that if you are a juvenile and you are accused of a crime, you are not being prosecuted in the criminal court. You are being sent to the Chancery Division Family Court, and that is a court of equity, and the goal is not punishment. The goal is rehabilitation. This is significantly different from the criminal justice system because the criminal justice system is focused on punishment. The juvenile justice system is supposed to be centered around rehabilitation and supporting a juvenile through a difficult process. Now, what most parents assume is after an arrest that their child is going to be treated the same way as an adult, that they are going to be taken to jail, that there's going to be a detention hearing, that there's going to be a criminal court prosecution, and that they are going to inevitably have a permanent criminal record. And there's nothing they're going to be able to do except wait for their court date. The reality is that juveniles are treated much differently, and there are different stages in this process that juveniles have to proceed through before they are subject to an adjudication in the juvenile system. So that assumption is difficult and not beneficial to your child because the way that the state is going to perceive and prosecute your child is going to dictate our approach in defending it. If it's an adult criminal charge, for instance, we may take more of a defensive circle the wagons approach, whereas if it's a juvenile, we may be more forthcoming with information that's beneficial or shows that we have issues that we're addressing. So we may not circle the wagons, we may show a little bit behind the curtain to show that our child is working through something, is getting psychological treatment or care, or requires some programs or assistance outside of school that's going to help explain why they're in this situation. So one of the major misconceptions in juvenile matters is that nothing can really be done early on in the process, and that is just simply not the case. In a juvenile proceeding, there are many more opportunities to off-ramp or de-escalate these charges or put your child in a situation where they're going to be viewed more favorably by the court system. So early intervention is critical in juvenile matters. So here's what happens when a juvenile is actually charged. Number one, they are not charged on a criminal complaint. They are charged on a complaint of juvenile delinquency. And they are not convicted of a crime, they are adjudicated delinquent. After a complaint is issued, there are times when they will execute a warrant or go pick up your child as they did in the Adolescence clip, but more often it is going to be a complaint that is issued. Family case management is going to make a decision on whether or not your child is going to be detained or they're going to seek detention, and then you're going to have a scheduled court date. At that scheduled court date, their parent or guardian is going to be advised that their child has been accused of a juvenile offense and that they are required to have legal representation. That means that the parent or guardian must go hire an attorney, and if they can't afford one, they will be assigned the public defender. This is much different from the criminal justice system, where you can appear pro se or on your own. Juveniles do not have that opportunity. They must be represented by an attorney. Also, the complaint for juvenile delinquency doesn't go to the criminal court. It's going to go to the Chancery Division family part, and you're not going in front of a criminal judge, you're going in front of a juvenile judge. And that juvenile judge's goal is not to punish your child, but to determine what is in the child's best interest and what can best be done to rehabilitate your child. Now, while many cases proceed to the juvenile judge, there are a number of different resolutions that happen before someone goes in front of a juvenile judge. For instance, there's something called an intake service conference, which means that you're not going in front of a juvenile judge. You're being diverted, and you're going to speak to a probation officer about resolving your case and potentially dismissing it. There's also something called a JCC, a Juvenile Conference Committee, where you're going in front of a number of individuals from the community who are going to evaluate your situation with the eye towards rehabilitation and dismissal. There's also something called a station house adjustment. There's also the ability for the courts to send you in front of a juvenile referee, which is similar to a juvenile judge, but a less formal proceeding. So there are a number of positive and possible outcomes for juveniles. There is community service, counseling, supervision, probation. There is juvenile jail. There is juvenile intensive supervision, but they are generally for more significant or serious offenses, and they're generally for juveniles that have prior contacts with the juvenile justice system. Now, a lot of people ask, what happens if my child is arrested in the same way that the 13-year-old was in adolescence? There's something critical to know, and that is if an offense is serious enough, first degree, second degree, murder, carjacking, the state has the ability to waive your child to adult court. That is a very, very harsh reality for some of our clients. They're going to take your son or daughter and they're going to say, I know you're a juvenile, know you're under the age of 18, but we're going to waive you up to adult court and prosecute you as if you were an adult. That means the same exposure for prison time and permanent records. What's critical to know beyond that is they can only waive you in New Jersey if you are 15 years of age or older. Now that used to be 14, but it's been raised to 15. So if the adolescence case happened here in New Jersey, he would be prosecuted in the juvenile court and could not be waived to adult court. The most important takeaway from all this is that juvenile cases are serious and they need to be taken seriously, but they are not the same as if your child is 18 years of age and is being thrown into the criminal justice system. There are a number of opportunities to find positive results and outcomes for your child, and there's also a number of ways that we can keep your son or daughter's record sealed so that it cannot be disclosed and hurt them for the rest of their life. It's also critical to have someone who's experienced in the juvenile justice system in the prosecution of juvenile matters, because missteps aren't going to result in your child necessarily going to jail, but it could mean they're placed on a term of probation that's longer than necessary, or they don't need to be on probation. And then if they get in trouble again, now you're compounding the issues. So if you or someone you know has a child that is being investigated or has been charged with a juvenile offense, please contact our office. We're happy to help in any way that we can. We'll review your case, give you solid advice, and put you and your family in the best position for the best possible result. We are criminal trial attorneys. We have your back. That's what we do.